Welcome back to Sports Night in Quarantine. I'm Andy Hewling, and I'm joined by Delaney Barrow, and we're going to jump into the week's biggest talking points in sports, and then also unveil our winner in the Auburn Sports Bracket Challenge. And we're going to actually start with that. And we had the Final Four and the Kick Six in the final round after getting through the Final Four earlier this week. And you, the fans, voted on who should win the whole tournament, and it came down to these two. And by no surprise at all, the Kick Six won it all. And it was honestly kind of surprising, I guess, the differential between the two. The Kick Six won by almost twice as many votes. And I was thinking that it would be a little bit closer just because the Final Four was a meaningful event to Auburn fans, but the Kick Six still hung true. Um, I would say, Delaney, you can back me up. I think Auburn, is becoming sort of a basketball school, but are their roots, I think we can tell, still in football.
I think definitely, like you said, that the Final Four run was historical for our basketball team, and it really raised the attendance at this year's games. The jungle was overflowing pretty much every home game, which was incredible for the future of the program. But the Kick Six is just an iconic moment that will forever be replayed in Auburn's fans' minds, and it's so easy to just hear the radio call in your head whenever you think about that game. And so I think that one's more of a singular moment that brings most important for the past of Auburn sports moments. But going forward, I think that the Final Four shows that there's still so much to come in the future for all Auburn sports.
Agreed. I think obviously, I was at the Kick Six as well, at the game, and saw how that unfolded. And even I watched a SEC Network interview with Gus yesterday via Zoom, and he talked about how he'd seen that maybe over 70 plus times, even in just the first year after it happened. So I think, even I was watching it, multiple times the couple days after that game. So it's replayed all over, in the internet and YouTube. And yeah, it's just a great moment indeed. Well, we're going to hop into our first topic of the show, and that will be on the recruiting trail, as Bruce Pearl has signed another big recruit to his team in Dylan Cardwell from McEachern High School in Powder Springs, Georgia. Cardwell is a center at 6'10", 220 pounds, and looks to fill kind of that role that Austin Wiley and Anthony McLemore had last year after they are both leaving because they were seniors. And Cardwell and Babatunde Akambola will most likely be the two big guys down low. All three guys, Sharif Cooper, Akambola, and Cardwell, went to high school together at McEachern. So hopefully they will kind of create a bond at Auburn. Delaney, what do you think of this pickup? And not only that, but how Auburn has become in the top 10 in recruiting rankings, which speaks a lot about them.
I think it's a huge recruit for Coach Bruce Pearl. This is his best recruiting class in Auburn history. Last year with Okoro, that was his best up until this point, and this year surpassed last. And this is Auburn's best recruiting class in the whole basketball program history. So I think that it shows that they have tons to prove, especially after this year's season getting cut short, and they're just really looking to continue their upward climb in the overall rankings of basketball school history.
Yeah, it'll be really cool to see what Auburn can do, because they're going to have guys like Sharif Cooper, Justin Powell, Dylan Cardwell, and then some of the guys who are already on the team who will get a chance to play, like Devin Cambridge, Jamal Johnson, just to name a few guys. I mean, Auburn should have the depth that they're looking for and that they've had. Do you see a lot of these guys who were, kind of coming off the bench when Okoro and Purifoy and Dowdy and McCormick were playing? Do you see a lot of these guys, I guess, filling the roles that those guys had last year?
Mhm. I do. They're going to have some big shoes to fill, but they've learned so much from the seniors last year that I think they're ready to put those skills to the test. I mean, Jamal Johnson filled in some, and like you said, Devin Cambridge and um, Turbo Jones and all them are going to have, I think they're really excited to put to the test what they already learned from Coach Pearl and also the seniors who are no longer here.
Yeah, it will be a really interesting year for Auburn basketball. I'm sure everyone will be excited when they return to action later this winter. So now we're going to jump into some more NCAA news as Kansas has been, I guess, allegedly committed some violations against the NCAA's recruiting policies, as they've been allegedly reported to have used Adidas and their scouts as a way to kind of wrangle in some of their players to their school. Now, Kansas, though, is still fighting this, saying that it's more Adidas is doing than theirs, but they were already involved in this FBI scandal that happened a couple years ago that even sent Auburn's assistant coach Chuck Person to jail uh, for um, for committing these violations and bribing people with over $190,000 of money. So Tigers and the Jayhawks kind of share this in common. Fortunately for Auburn, it wasn't as harsh, but for Kansas, it could be very harsh because of what they've done. Delaney, do you see I guess what's your reaction to this, and do you think, that Kansas will suffer because of this?
I think they will suffer. It's interesting that they are trying to claim that Adidas it did it all without them knowing and they had no say in it. But it's also interesting because with the new rule within the NCAA about endorsements, that's part of the rules that they came up with. It's how players can't rep their school and the brands. They're only supposed to be representing the brands. That's part of the reason why that rule is in place, so that the brands don't serve as an additional form of recruiting. So it's kind of interesting how all this is really coming into light now.
Mhm. I agree, and I think, you're gonna come to a point where I mean, everyone realizes that college sports is probably bigger than the academic side of the college scope, but you've got to come to a point where you've got to keep the game, and the integrity of it. And I think schools, they do have these brands, and they have to have someone to provide their jerseys. They can't just make them themselves. Um, but you've got to protect the integrity of the game, like I said, and not have these things happen. And I know for Auburn, it's going to get to a point where maybe they're on this scope that Kansas is. I'm not saying that they are. They're definitely not. Kansas has won so many titles and done so many great things in their basketball program that they're kind of ahead of Auburn in basketball blue bloods. But Auburn's on that trend. Maybe if they're able to win a national title or just stay relevant throughout the next couple years. So I think it's going to be something that interesting to watch as schools kind of deal with this and deal with the growing of the game, and like what they're going to have to do to try to get recruits in. And like, I'm not saying that they need to go bribe people or use companies to like for their own gain, but like I think there's going to be a money aspect of it one day where players are going to say, hey, I want to go to the NBA right now, but if a college is willing to pay me, that might that might deter me from going to the NBA. I think that's a worthy conversation that should happen.
I agree.
So next, we're going to jump into some sports that may be returning or are returning very soon. And the first one is something that's more near and dear to my heart. I'm a big soccer fan, but it's actually a big major sports league in Europe. Is the German Bundesliga. Will be returning next week on May 16th, which is next Saturday. German soccer is a big deal over in Europe, and even American fans are starting to watch it because it's available on Fox networks now. Um, but the first big match will actually be Schalke versus Borussia Dortmund, which is a big derby matchup, and it includes Dortmund, who is trying to fight for the title right now with Bayern Munich. So there's in the top four, they're only separated by 5 points. So it's a really tight race in Germany. So Leipzig, Dortmund, Bayern Munich, and Borussia Mönchengladbach are all in the top four, and they will be fighting for the title starting next week. There's only a few games remaining, about 9 games left till the end of the season. So soccer fans will have a chance to get to see the rest of their seasons. Hopefully, other leagues in Europe will start to come back, but German Bundesliga is a good sign for other leagues around the world to start returning to action. And Delaney is going to tell us about another league that's going to be opening back up in place of the Olympics.
So during the 2-week void on NBC where the Olympics were supposed to be streamed, there is now going to be lacrosse. So the PLL, Premier Lacrosse League, is going to play 14 games and along with a single elimination tournament to find a winner. And what's really cool about that is they're only going to have to quarantine about 300 people in order to make this happen, because there's about 150 players and everybody else is personnel and TV crew. And the PLL really rose last year in kind of an opposition to MLL, the Major League Lacrosse. And there's only several teams, but what's cool about them is that they would travel to one city, and they weren't really located. They didn't each have their own city, but all the teams would travel to one city to play several games in one weekend. So they kind of took a new take on the sport, and they're still on the rise since they just started last year. So it's going to be super interesting to see them take up that important time slot and hopefully just continue to get their ratings up in order to continue to probably completely replace the MLL in the coming years.
Yeah, no, I know lacrosse is a big deal, especially even in college. Lacrosse is really big, but I know Premier League, I've heard a little bit about it. I don't watch it personally, but I know it's a big deal to a lot of people in other parts of the country. But I think, it'd be interesting to watch that because I think lacrosse is something that a lot of people don't respect, but it's a very tough sport, and very, very fun to play. I've played it a few times before just like for fun, but I think it's kind of fun. It's almost like to me, it sounds like it's like soccer and like sort of a little bit of football, but you're like playing with like lacrosse nets and balls. But yeah, I think, it'll be interesting to see when sports return. And even one more topic is that Jim Harbaugh is in favor of players who didn't get drafted in college football to return for their another season of play because of coronavirus. Also, James Franklin of Penn State has said that he would prefer a smaller schedule this season where they just play conference games. Now, I will say one thing that can come into play is that smaller schools who make money off playing bigger opponents, that could be something that they lose some of their finances from. Delaney, would you be in favor of either one of these things happening?
Personally, as long as we have some type of sports in the fall, I will be satisfied. But like you said, that's a huge deal. I know when Auburn played Samford last year, it was the weekend before Thanksgiving. It was kind of it's not a huge game for Auburn fans, but Samford got paid a decent amount to travel to Auburn to play us. And like you said, that's important for those small schools who are still growing their programs because they're not the huge D1 program SEC school like Auburn, Alabama, LSU. So they need those funds. So I personally would love any form of sports, whether it be a shortened schedule of just conference games, but I know that there are a lot of schools that would rely on a full season.
Yeah, I think it would play into problems, but also I would think about the endurance of the athletes because when you're playing tough games, I know the SEC is challenging, other conferences are challenging too, like the Big 10 or the Big 12. But I would worry about scheduling, all your conference opponents and just playing them because, playing in the SEC, and I think we know it's a gauntlet, and if you don't have some kind of games to prepare you, I mean, you could fall apart really quickly. And I'm not saying that that's not how they shouldn't play. I mean, I think if they're going to shorten it, they might have to do that. But I think, maybe add in a few other games, and then just play your like division opponents and maybe like two opponents out of the East. I think that would be a cool thing, is just like give us a few small games and then put in a few, like two games maybe from the East, and then just play all your Western opponents like usual in the SEC. Um, I think it would play a lot of challenges, but I'm not saying it's not impossible. Do you think that that's how they should do it, or would you like suggest maybe playing a wide variety of people in the conference?
I think that's, like you said, that's smart with the endurance of the athletes, SEC especially. All the games are going to be challenging. So, especially if there's a shortened training time and preparation period for the athletes to get ready for football season, it might be smarter to have a shortened season, especially in those conferences where all the opponents will prove big challenges. But I think that, like you said, even spreading a little bit to the other side of the conference could be helpful kind of for break games. And obviously, they would still play a factor in the final rankings and the bowl game seeding. But at the same time, it will help provide a break from like you said, the gauntlet of SEC play.
And then final question for you. So Jarrett Stidham is looking like the favorite to be the Patriots quarterback. I know you're a big Patriots fan, so I thought I'd ask. Bill Belichick came out on his Zoom interview on ESPN, I saw, and said that Jarrett Stidham is probably going to be the favorite to be the quarterback. What do you think about him and his, I guess his attributes that he can bring to the job?
I think that he will be bringing a lot of skills to the team. He learned under Brady for a year, so he has some good basis to start on. Even though he didn't get to play very much last year, I'm sure that he got tons of practice reps, and even just being surrounded by all the talent on the team had to have taught him quite a few things. And the Patriots are going to open up the season against the Dolphins, and last year, obviously, that game didn't end the way Patriots fans wanted it to. So I think that Jarrett is going to be starting out with some fire if he does start, and he probably will earn that position during preseason. And once he takes care of the Dolphins, it's kind of going to be Stidham's reign in New England. And hopefully he can just continue to grow the team, and it'll be a hard shoes to fill, but become that leader that the team is now lacking now that Brady is in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think that will be interesting to watch. Obviously, Stidham being an alumni of Auburn, people hopefully want him to do well. One more alumni quarterback is Cam Newton, who is still doesn't have a team, doesn't not many offers really to buy him. I know he was rumored to go to Jacksonville at one point. Do you think Cam's going to find a place before the NFL starts?
I think he will. He's a talented quarterback. Like you said, he came from Auburn, so he came from great competition play. He was successful with the Panthers, and he had a quote earlier this week saying that he would like a starting job, but he'll settle for a backup position, which is a very smart move to say that and just verbalize that, because a lot of teams already have who they're going when they know who they want to start. And Cam, no matter where he lands, he'll still be able to compete if he just shows out and gives it everything he can. Even if he starts as a backup, he still will have the opportunity to start as first string. And I just think that any team that gets him will be lucky to have him.
For sure. I think obviously, I think you could tell with the teams who drafted quarterbacks that they weren't really interested. But I think, with the Jaguars, which was one of the places he's rumored to go, you have Garner Minshew, but I think Cam could fill a spot maybe as a backup because there's a lot of questions with that team because sure, you've got a good quarterback, but Cam maybe is that insurance that maybe something happens, they need another quarterback, and you can throw in a guy who's been to a Super Bowl and had some success in Carolina. And I'd say that with any team, not just the Jaguars. But if something happens, you can have a guy that has played in a role before, and been the starting guy for a big franchise. So, but that's going to do it for us. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. We'll be back next week with another show for you guys, and we'll see you then.